Listen, I'm begging you to let go of what feels safe, because the thing that's keeping you safe, honestly, is the thing that's keeping you stuck. Here's the thing, you already know what it is. It's the relationships that you outgrew, but you never left because of comfort. Or it's the job that you're good at, but deep down, you know you hate it and it doesn't serve you anymore. And maybe it's just the version of you that everybody already knows how to deal with. And that anchor only has weight because you believe it does. A ship, honestly, doesn't go under because the sea level rises. It goes under because an anchor tied it to the bottom of the ocean with a line that was too tight. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So I want you to stay with me on this, because I didn't get here through a book. I didn't get here through a teacher. I got here through the word itself. So I want you to think about this. If you take the word anchors and you move the letters around, it becomes Archons, and these are rulers. If you then move the letters again, you get a word called Charons, and that's not with an S. It's actually the ferryman who collects the toll from the dead. Now, all these stitched together. Then you move the letters one more time and you get Ranchos, and this isn't huevos ranchos, but a fenced field that keeps the herd inside. So let's get into it. For me, I thought it was a weird, clever anagram until I calculated the letters. One method gives me the number 78, and the second gives me the number 33. And both of these end at the number 6. And those same numbers led me back into 666, the 33 segments of the spine, the Watchers, which we'll get into, and one sentence I had been using to describe my entire life. We're going to do this on paper, and you'll see exactly where the numbers come from, how the same 7 letters literally change jobs, and how to tell whether the thing you call grounding is actually helping you rise or quietly teaching you to stay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one sentence and an 8-day experiment that lets you see the system operating in your own life. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to show you how the system works, because I've got some gifts for you. So let's get into it. Everybody knows what an anchor is, well, maybe you don't. It has one job. It bites the earth at the bottom of the harbor, and it keeps the boat from leaving. Very necessary. We should all be so blessed to have anchors in our lives, because if we didn't, harbors would be chaos without them. But the boat always still rises, falls, and swings around that one fixed point, which is the anchor. So here's the question: whether all that movement is taking the boat somewhere or only moving it around in a fixed circle. This is one of the things we have to see about ourselves. The line to the anchor is where it gets complicated. If you put too much slack on the anchor, the boat goes all over the place and it starts hitting other boats. So there's discernment in anchoring. How much slack do I actually put into the rope, into the chain? Because the tide comes in and the tide goes out, and the boat rises and it falls, and it swings one way, then it swings the other in the same concentric circle around the same fixed point. And it does this over and over again. And honestly, that's how our lives function. We have the same relationships over and over again, the same anchors that keep us in these same concentric cycles. So relationships become anchors, jobs, money, sometimes an ailment. We build all of these oftentimes to create stillness and a lack of motion. And there's nothing wrong with stillness. The thing is when the anchor becomes your ruler, you got a problem. Think about the boat itself. There's people steering, people tending to the lines, people scrubbing the decks, so much activity on top of the boat that from on top of the deck, it looks like your whole world is in motion. But the reality of it is the boat really isn't going anywhere. So there's a thing called an illusion of safety. And that's where the danger comes in. Say you set your anchor on a low tide and you pull that line so tight because tight feels safe, then a bigger tide comes in. Now the line won't let the boat rise and the boat starts to drown. And that's how so many people are. Myself has been that way included. We set our anchor when things feel calm, with no perspective on how high the water can get. Then new abundance, a new relationship, something rolls into your life. And instead of rising with it, you start drowning. And you drown because you don't know how to carry that much change. So I want you to look at this diagram here. You'll notice that you've got your anchors that we just discussed. Every one of these words carries the same letters. And the way that this works is that it functions across weight, a rule, a toll, and a field, okay? This is your weight, is your anchor. What ends up ruling your life are these Archons that we're about to get into in a minute. You've got a toll that you have to pay in your life, and you've got a field that contains everything. Once you understand how all of this works, you're gonna start seeing these patterns, and candidly, it's gonna blow your mind because it blew mine. So this is where we were talking about how the boat moves when your anchor does not. If you've locked yourself too much into a fixed point and you did it at low tide, what ends up taking place when that high tide comes, you start to drown and the boat is not going to rise, okay? Everything is always going to turn. There's a thing called the Hermetic laws where the law of rhythm will always say there's going to be a low tide, there's always going to be a high tide. You have to know how the tides rise and fall in your life. Otherwise, you will drown, or you'll put so much slack into place that you end up hitting all the other boats. And you're that reckless guy in your spiritual community or in your community that looks extremely ungrounded, but is anchored, but was anchored from a high tide position. So a lot of people use the concept of being rooted. Now I want to get into the difference between rooted, grounded, and being anchored, because a lot of people think they mean the same thing. And physically, they do three completely different jobs. Roots, they actually feed the tree. They feed growth. Grounding ends up carrying a charge and allows currents to be able to move. And an anchor prevents movement. It holds a still position. Once I separated those three jobs, some of the things that I had called support started to look very different. I want you to think about a tree. When the water comes, the root drinks. It takes the water and the minerals and it feeds them up into the tree. If you could double the height of that tree overnight, I'll tell you what, the roots would celebrate, because the height proves they did their job. Grounding has a completely different job. A lot of people think an anchor is that thing. They think it's something that grounds them. But grounding gives a charge somewhere for the energy to move. And anchoring still creates that stillness. When an electrician runs a ground wire in your house, that wire isn't there to create stability in your house. It's there so that if a large charge comes in, that charge has somewhere to go, to move, without burning the whole house down. So when a big charge hits me, trouble, a new relationship, a pile of money coming in or going out, anything that electrifies my system that creates that charge. The question is where the ground wire is in my life. Where does that have room to move? And do I have one? Am I grounded? That's the difference. A root feeds your system, a ground carries the charge, and an anchor pins things down to create stillness. Because I hear this constantly inside of the Miracle Academy. Many people say, this relationship keeps me grounded. My job keeps me grounded. The kids keep me grounded. The location that I live in keeps me grounded. The only thing that can keep you grounded is your own awareness and your own choices. And you do this on a daily basis. I'm going to say a universal statement. There's nothing external that will do that for you. And if you think there is, you're fooling yourself. You're in a codependent, awkward relationship. So many people that have money problems or career problems, I ask them this one question. Is the job you're in funding the rise of your life, or is it fighting the rise of your life? I'll tell you, most people come back and say it's fighting. And what I'll say is the part I find fascinating is they admit that the thing isn't helping them rise, and they'll rationalize and defend it like crazy because honestly, it's the thing that kind of helps them survive on a daily basis. The fear of loss convinces them it's a root, and it's actually doing nothing but pinning them down. And that's the anchor. And the anchor, once we give our power away to it, it becomes the Archon. And the Archon is the ruler. It's the thing that takes over your life. They become something you worship or something you run away from. It becomes an angel, a demon, a god. All of it grown out of a mechanism you believed was holding you steady. It's funny how these letters work. I'm going to get into it here in a second. And here's the thing. I've had an awesome title on a business card. It was the president of entertainment at this one company, right? Sounds like a party guy, but it wasn't. And I used to say I would never leave Dallas, my home city, because of my family. Sometimes it's a diagnosis. Like personally, I've had this hip issue for a while. So I said, I'll never squat, never do deadlifts again, never jump, never run, never ride a bike. And that has all changed in my life. And sometimes it's a grievance. I'll give you an example. Me and my father, we don't have the greatest relationship. And I love him so much. And he's my dude, like from an energetic bond perspective. But he's made some choices that I won't allow into my family circle now. And I still see him every now and then, and it hurts to have this distance from him. And when I allowed that to rule my life, that grievance, it was an anchor and it pinned me down. I had this guilt and it created a disconnect with me and my wife. Now all I see is a choice. The choices that I am making are rooting me. They're feeding me so my tree can grow and get taller. And if he ever wants to take shade under that tree, I've created so much space for him. So the thing you'll recognize is there's nobody perfect here. You know, I've said all of it. I said, I'm bad with numbers. I'm bad with money. I'm bad with relationships. And what changed was the accuracy of my statements, because there's precision in your words. The words you say are the spells you cast. And that can actually be calculated. We're going to get into how we calculate this here in a minute. Napoleon Hill calls that hypnotic rhythm. And he does this in a book called Outwitting the Devil. Inside of that, it notates we say the same things, we do the same things, and we even begin to believe that's the only thing that's true. I'm unattractive. I'm always going to be poor. I'm not a good father. Jesus is the only way to heaven. And if you say it enough, that rhythm becomes a filter that you built for yourself. And only certain evidence fits through it, and everything else gets turned away. And you don't see what's possible. You miss out on so much of life. Every letter in the alphabet has a very specific position. A is 1, B is 2, and if you count straight through to Z, you get 26. That's one system. There's also a thing called reduction, or in other areas, they call it the digital root, where you add the digits of the numbers together until only one digit is left. I want to give you a mini disclaimer before we start. In some languages, there's actually letters that were numbers. In Hebrew, Aleph is 1. And reading a word as a total is a practice they called gematria. Greek did the same thing, and they called it isophacy. The English language never really worked that way. So any number you attach to an English word is a number somebody chose to assign. And that doesn't make it useless. It actually makes it a system, and we call that numerology, right? And when somebody tells you a word equals a number, the honest question is, which system and in what order do you do the steps? Because order changes the entire answer. So let's run anchors on the alphabet position, okay? So letter A is 1, check. The letter N is 14, all right? The letter C is 3, letter 8 is H, the letter O is 15, the letter R is 18, and the letter S is 19. And if you add all of those numbers up, 1 plus 14 plus 3 plus 8 plus 15 plus 18 plus 19, you get the number 78. And if you then take the number 78 and you reduce it to the digital root, you get 15. Now, if I went and I turn this into Archons and I flip the R and the N around each other, nothing changes. It's still 78. Because the cool thing about addition, it doesn't care what order you hand the numbers in at. God and dog carry the same code. It's the same 7 values with a different word sitting on top of them. I'm going to tell you why this matters. So there's a claim that I was handed. I was handed that 78 ends up folding down to 33. So let's fold it. And folding is when we go down to the digital root. 7 plus 8 is 15. 1 plus 5 is 6. There's absolutely no 33 in this. And that started to confuse me because I was basically wondering how to get back to this 33 number. So as I started to dig deeper, I understood that there's another folding that should have happened a bit earlier. And that folding takes place at each original letter, which is the source code of that letter itself. So what I ended up doing is basically folding the digital root back into their source code of each individual letter, right? Instead of adding all 7 values as they show up numerically and then reducing down to the total, you reduce each letter first to their source code, and then you add up what's left. So A stays as 1, right? Which we've already shown this. N goes to 14, which reduces to 5. C stays at 3, H stays at 8, O is 15, which reduces to 6. R reduces to 9 at 18, from 18 to 9, and S from 19 to 10 to 1. Now, when you line those up, 1 plus 5 plus 3 plus 8 plus 6 plus 9 plus 1, and I pull that together, I end up exactly with 33. And now if you fold 33, 3 plus 3 is 6. So 33 is real, and it was never hiding. It was just hidden inside of the complications that we end up creating at the higher value systems. And we create different doors or different portals for that to exist. 78 is created from a straight sum, which folds to 15 and reduces to 6. If you reduce each letter first and go to the source of that letter, which is the numerical inference point, then you end up getting 33. These are 2 doors, 2 totals, same 7 letters. So let's go further. When 78 becomes 15 and 15 becomes 6, a strange visual sequence appears inside of the tarot. There are actually 78 cards inside of the tarot deck. And card number 15, if 7 plus 8 equals 15, is the card of the devil. What it does is it shows 2 human figures, these are humans by the way, with massive loops around their neck and chains tied to a stone block. And it's wide enough to lift it right off. It'd be like a dog backing out of a huge collar. Like nobody is welded to anything, they are there by choice. And then what happens with 15, if you take this 1 plus 5, out of 15, you end up with 6. And the 6th card inside of the tarot are the lovers. It's actually the same 2 figures standing under an open sky. One of the things that I noticed was the loose chains, because the chains you can lift off, it creates a completely different problem from one that's locked down. If those chains were like all around the collar, and the person couldn't breathe, I'd be having probably a different conversation. Archons and anchors are not the same word, wearing different clothes. They're the same 7 letters arranged completely differently. And each arrangement gives the same material a different job. So I want to flip them again and go deeper into what we call the Charons, or the ferrymen, okay? The Charon is what's called a ferryman inside of Greek mythology. It's the one who rows the dead across the river, and his fee is a coin per passenger. Greek families used to bury their dead with a fare placed under the tongue so that the crossing was already paid for when they got on that ferry. So imagine somebody in your family dies, you put a coin under their tongue for safe passage. But Charon's job has only one detail that changes the whole image. He ferries the dead. So when a living person keeps paying a reoccurring cost to preserve their stillness, that fare is being collected on the wrong deck. And when we override our truth with money, we're putting the coin in our mouth, under our own tongue, and speaking from somewhere extremely inauthentic. When we do this, we volunteer to be dead because someone else is moving us across the waters. And I want you to take a look at this diagram. The anchor is the thing that creates your stillness. You end up through that stillness finding something to rule you. And then after that, you end up dying and you pay a toll to keep yourself locked into this entire space. Each one of these reduces down, no matter how you like it, to 666. It depends on the path you take. And the thing about it is it's rarely money. You know, oftentimes it's the sentence you didn't say at dinner because you wanted peace in your family. That's part of the toll. The peace is the anchor, and the lack of integrity is the death. And the cost looks so ordinary because it's just what everybody does, is what we were taught to do, to be polite, to close your mouth. And so the thing that we have to do to break away from this is we have to name the fare that you've been paying your whole life. Otherwise, if you don't name it, it gets paid forever. And it gets paid down generation after generation. So between now and the year 2030, because something special is coming then, this is the work we all have to do. Identify every place you've been paying a fare and never named it, because that's where we hand over our spiritual energy to maintain a system so that the rulers or the Archons that we created keep profiting from our lack of awareness, and we stay dead in the process. We created all of this for ourselves. We created the Archons, we create the anchors, we pay the toll. Let's flip the letters one more time. When we get Ranchos, somebody's probably gonna say, Sean, you've taken it too far with Ranchos. Maybe, but I still can't look away from it. Ranchos is a fenced ground for domesticated animals, all right? The herd. And when you're inside of that fence, you read it as protection. I mean, look at this diagram right here. It's fence, reads as protection from the wolves or the badgers or whatever it is. And nobody's coming in to get me. And the reality of it is the rancher who's outside of it built it candidly so the herd wouldn't leave. And both of those are true at the same time, right? The wolves really aren't getting in, and the person who built it did it so nothing will get out, right? Superposition, right? Both things are true. So are you in the position of the herd, or are you in the position of the observer, of the rancher? Because if you're the observer, you candidly know you created it. And then you have a choice. I can stay, I can leave, I can come and go. And this one does something the other three don't. Weight holds a person in place. That's the anchor. Yeah. Rule directs a person, the Archons. A toll drains that person. You pay it all the time. That's the Charon. Those three are operations performed on a life. But a fence applies the field where the operations happen. The Ranchos is the entire field of your life. You created it, and you can shed it or keep it or rebuild it. It's up to you. The anchor creates the stillness. The Archons rule that stillness. The Charon collects the tolls, and the Rancho is the field where the whole thing happens, where the whole reality takes place. Then I ran the first three through the second calculation, right? Where anchor lands on 6, Archon ends up at 6, and Charon ends up at 6. If you stack them in the order of the system you're looking at, you get 666, right? And then there's a 6 that sits outside of it. And I want to be pretty precise about what that means. Those 6s are what I call stacked. They're not added. I'm not summing them into 18 and then ending up at 9 and not multiplying them in anything, because these are the derivatives. Like, you don't add Archons, anchors, and Charons together. They have their own individual lanes. You don't add Ranchos into Archons. So they have their own individuation, similar to like you and me. So what everybody calls the devil's number, if you read it from inside the fence, means it's stillness that's created by the outside, Archon rule, that produces death from the Charon. But here's the thing, there's a key that lives inside of it. And we were talking about, if we reduce things down to source and you go down the path of 33 and you end up at the 6 or the lovers in the tarot, you end up what I call is the shortcut of the fast path. So it's the same 6, but it reads differently. It reads as life. It changes the perspective from where you're standing. You are the observer that's created things internally. We're standing from the outside. The question you have to ask, are you the 6 that came through the 33 outside the whole ecosystem, being the observer and seeing exactly what it is as a creator in your life, making new decisions for your life and freeing other people out of that archonic trap? Or are you the person who stays inside it, convinced that 666 means the cycle has you? Both mean the same thing. All things are true. It's just a matter of the perspective that you're in, right? Stillness ruled from the outside creates death. Stillness you create from the inside, which is the path of 33, creates life. So we're gonna move on a little bit. This gave me a pattern, but it didn't tell me where 666 came from. So what I did is I went backward through the record. The first place I landed was Solomon's gold. Then I ended up in Revelation, the structure of carbon 12, and then a 6x6 solar square, 4 appearances of 666, 4 different contexts with one number carrying far more history than the slogan most of us inherited, Mark of the Beast. Okay, so the oldest place it turns up that I ended up finding was in 1 Kings, I think it's chapter 10, verse 14. Yeah, right here. All right. Solomon takes in 666 talents of gold in a single year. And the very next chapter reports that he has turned toward other gods. Now I want to pause here for a second, because when we get to this 1 Kings, we're pretty deep into the Bible, okay? And there's only one God, but then we have reference of other gods. So just leave it there. There'll be some videos coming into the future that we're going to talk about. Make sure you subscribe to get access to those, because when we talk about these other gods, we're going to talk about other angels. We're going to talk about the Watchers. We're going to talk about Hermetic laws. I'm tangenting right now, but very passionate when I see the plurality of this word show up in our Bible. Okay, so I digress. Moving on. His wealth created his stillness, anchor, right? He received that from the outside, and then that created its death, and it turned him. I'm not telling you the gold caused it. It's his position and his perspective on it and how it sits, all right? Now let's get into Revelation. Chapter 13, verse 18 instructs the reader to count, which is the exact thing we're doing right now. This is the first time it starts talking about decoding the reality. But when you go to count, the manuscripts disagree. Some witnesses read it as 666, and the others read it as 616. And here's the thing, both work the same doggone way. Both count for Nero Caesar. This was the code that they left around this whole Nero Caesar thing, depending on the spelling of Nero Caesar. So it's the same person, a little bit of a different door, and people were using code to identify their reality back then as well. 2 other places also carry this number, and one has been sitting in front of you since science class. Carbon 12, the isotope of our organic bodies. It's what we're built on. 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons, and a 6x6 solar square right here. That came in the 16th century, whose rows each total 111 and whose whole totals 666 when you add it all up. So these are 4 distinct traditions with the same number. So all this has done is it's set us up for a very interesting correlation within these 7 letters, because the words produce 78 and then also produce 33. And you can't get to the 33 from the 78. You have to reduce each functional frequency, each functional letter down to its pure root, its pure source. And then you add it back together again. So what's cool about this is the whole way that we can get reborn again. The key is not to live in the 78, not to take the world you see at its face value. It's to identify it and then to reduce it down to the truth of what it is, and then find love inside of it. This is the map that we gave ourselves. This is why Gnosticism is important, because all of this code is mapping us back to it. 33 honestly kept pulling me back. So I went a little bit deeper on the 33, and I ended up in Mason land. So I'm going to talk about Manly P. Hall, this genius who put those 2 counts together. And he did this before he formally ever became a Mason. It's probably why they pulled him in there, because like, you're decoding too much of what we got going on. In 1928, he described spirit fire lifted through the 33 vertebrae, or the 33 degrees, or the segments of the human spinal column, and entering the dome chamber of the human skull. A year later, he ended up writing that the spinal column is also Jacob's ladder, and that its 33 segments are the degrees of masonry. And the Aramaic word behind all of this is Golgotha, which is where Jesus was crucified, and that actually means the place of the skull. Rudolf Steiner actually got kind of big into talking about Golgotha because the 33, Jesus's time of life, led to the skull, which is the same thing as the vertebrae leading to the skull. I don't think there's any accident that these things show up that way. Then I started looking at the builders. The system had learned to read personal ascent through the body. When I get into the body aspect, Albert Pike starts to show up inside of the research. He's usually quoted as announcing a secret Luciferian doctrine to the high degrees. This whole myth and lore has created a lot of negativity against the Masons. That quotation honestly is a forgery. This guy named Leo Taxil invented it, and Taxil even confessed later to inventing it. But nobody actually maps the confession. They just like hold on to the thing that they perceive to be true. So Pike's real words are actually way stranger than the fake ones because he leaves the thought open. So he writes, Lucifer, the light bearer, calls it a strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. And then he asks whether one bearing the light can blind a weak or selfish soul. The fake hands you a finished thing to be afraid of, but the real page asks the real serious question. And a finished explanation can rule you a lot easier than an open one, than somebody just probing and giving you options and a question. One thing I appreciate about Pike is that he left the door open for you to have your own exploration. This is what it means to be spiritual, is that Pike said, look, we've been taking this word Lucifer and demonizing humanity because of it, and yet it's supposed to bring light, and yet we call it the thing that causes darkness and judgment. So I'm throwing that out there because it's important for us to recognize that we've done this thing where we've demonized all of this Freemasons and everything along those lines. And who knows what goes on behind closed doors? I'm not a Mason, I don't know. But what I can say is that they live by a very specific code. They are looking through a very specific veil. And maybe cool things happen because of it. So let us all be open enough to exploring. So inside of being a Mason, this is in my research, might be wrong. Masons, you can correct me here, okay? There's a third degree where you become a master Mason. Then you get handed two emblems. One is an ark and one is an anchor. They're emblems of a well-grounded hope and a well-spent life. Then they describe the anchor that shall safely moor us in the peaceful harbor where the weary shall find rest. A ceremony built about raising also hands the candidate an object built to hold something down. And there's a tension that I hear in that. The tension is that if you carry that level of awareness in your spine, not only in a lodge, the degrees become a way of reading literally your own ascent through the body. But also what I find interesting is that there's this whole aspect of the rest in the harbor, which is a death that you leave behind. So the number 78 kept returning, but the next source changed the shape of the anchor. This one goes a little bit deep. In the book of Enoch, 200 watchers descend on Mount Hermon and bind themselves with a mutual oath before they carry out the plan. They actually said they moored themselves with the oath, the binding, the mooring, which is the same thing as the anchor. The first tether is their own promise. And by the end of the story, that tether has become chains literally under darkness. So if you don't know the book of Enoch, you'll find it in the Ethiopian Bible. And you'll hear Enoch quoted in Jude, verse 14. Basically, 200 watchers descend on Mount Hermon, and this is Mount Hermon right here, before they carry out the plan. Okay, they bind themselves with the mutual oath. I actually have been working on a song. I think I found out the name of that oath. The binding is the mooring. And what they teach is swords, armor, metallurgy, spell casting, all these things. Then in chapter 10, Azazel gets bound by hand and foot, and Azazel is the one running the metallurgy and face painting. In today's world reads as technology and beautification. So the 10th chapter binds technology and beautification into this construct that we call reality. And Jude, verse 6, calls it chains under darkness. And Enoch himself gets a different ending than any other human being. Genesis counts his life at 365 years. And it also says he doesn't die. He walked with God and then he was taken. And he was actually the 7th descendant from Adam. Remember, we have 7 letters that we're playing around with here with Archons, Anchors, Charons, and Ranchos. 7 is totally part of our coded reality too. 7 chakras, 7 colors of the rainbow, we won't get into that. And in Jewish mysticism, 3rd book of Enoch even has him transformed in what we call Metatron, the scribe of the presence is what they call him. And what is a scribe of the presence? Someone writing presence into our reality. So the Watchers entered through an oath and they finished in chains. They bound themselves through mooring ropes and they ended up with chains. Go back to the boat because binding is another kind of mooring. It keeps you still, but you can still move while you're tethered to the mountain. And the story changes the tether into chains under darkness. The anchor literally becomes the rule. That's the same movement we've been following since the first 7 letters that we started with on the very first page. and there's no accidents there. So now I have two separate things with dangerously similar names. And going down the book of Enoch, I ended up at the Enochian alphabet, which got really interesting. This was a system recorded by John Dee, who was Queen Elizabeth's astrologer. He was working with a scryer named Edward Kelly, and this was in 1583. And Kelly would look into a dense object and codes would come out. Sounds kind of crazy, but they called this being a scryer. And what they dictated into this reality was the entire alphabet, and they called it the Enochian alphabet. Enochian is not Enochic. Enochic is the ancient Jewish material that we just walked through. Enochian is Dee and Kelly's process of the 1500s. So it's totally separate. Sounds similar, but totally separate. It's actually kind of epic the way it sounds. Whenever I recently did this DMT extended journey, I had Danny Goler's lasers in the room, and I ended up actually seeing this Enochian alphabet coming out of it. When I came and I write down what I saw, I threw it into AI, 3 different language models, and it said I died. And I had never heard of the Enochian alphabet before that experience, and then it led me down this like crazy path. So I'm like, what the heck is this? The whole world is a very sexy real math problem is what I started to recognize with all these codes inside of it. And when you can understand the codes, you literally allow yourself to become free. So I kept seeing 78 in 3 different structures built through independent operations. One of them, put on this paper here, it's the Watchtowers. And this is John Dee's system, which has 12 by 13. So it's basically a grid of 12 by 13. When you multiply those together, you get 156. If you cut it in half, which is the mirroring effect, you end up at 78, literally 13 connected points. So then if you look at Metatron's cube, you end up having 13 connected points that create 78 unique relationships. So when you draw a circle to each individual aspect of Metatron's cube, you end up with 78 connections. Then in the tarot deck, you have literally 78 cards. So the number 78 brought me back to the same question, because I recognize that there's the 78, but also recognize there's the 33. And it's the same question that we kind of started with, which is not the fact that the system exists, it's where you're standing in relationship to the system. So one clue came up for me that sits inside of my pocket. It's the dollar bill, and it carries the pyramid of the 13 courses with an eye above and an unfinished stonework. And people will argue over that symbol. It's like the Illuminati and so many other things. And I'm not trying to get into that one right now. But the builders also drew a point inside of a circle. And these are the Mason builders, by the way. And they say that the point is the individual brother and the circle is the boundary line of his duty. That man is rendered as a dot that's fenced at the exact radius of what he owes. And he owes the duty of his life. The eye can see the whole building and everything missing inside of it. So either you're the observer that's sitting outside of it, witnessing it, or you are inside of it and you are ruled by the construct and the limitations of your world. The 78 gives you the clues for how to create your material reality. And what's cool about it is it spits out every platonic shape that creates the life that we live. And it really matters, but translating yourself into the 33 is what lets you find that sovereign center, that stillness, and always stays in love. This is how you stay in love, by mapping through the 33, by going into the original source of everything that you see. You're observing one from the perspective of love and kind of observing one from the perspective of death. And this is polarity in the Hermetics. An experiment that kind of mapped well for me was double slit experiment, where you send particles through 2 slits and without any kind of registration, and you get nothing but a waveform, like they just splatter all over the board in the back. All possibilities exist when this happens. If you add a detector, you'll get individual hits, and the result becomes what's expected. So what an observer means in that experiment means physical registration. It doesn't mean a human mind mechanically bending matter, but registration changes the result. Observation changes the result. And that part is what's important, is that our observation becomes a reality, and that a registration is something that a person can do to a sentence. So the question is right now, are you being observed into a possibility of somebody else's, or are you the observer that's observing possibilities in your life? You can be one or the other. There's no shame either way. It's just a matter of, do you want to be the creator or the victim? So here's how it shows up in reality, all right? When I say, I am anxious, the word am welds the experience to my identity, I. And that gives the sentence, anxiety, a permanent address inside the human being. Now what I want you to do is flip it. I felt anxious in the meeting. What that does is it moves the event into a place of space and time. This is why we have space and time. Same facts remain, but the second one no longer makes the feeling a still anchor of death, okay? When you observe it, full empathy, love, and grace, which is putting yourself into the construct of the 33, all of a sudden, there's no judgment in it. I've done this, and I've said I'm bad with numbers, when the accurate sentence was that the numbers didn't get my attention that week. One turns into a trait about me, the other describes what happens, and it gives it freedom to stop creating a prison in my own life. I mean, isn't it beautiful how this whole thing is just like a sexy math problem of how we can change the way we construct ourselves from the numbers that create our reality? The same thing happens with permission words. Should, have to, must, supposed to. Each one changes the authority without ever naming who gave the order. I have to answer this tonight may really mean I'm afraid of what happens if I wait. I should stay may mean somebody else's comfort has become the rule. The options are all still there, but it's about the grammar that's hiding them, the spells that become our reality. So be careful when you cast these on yourself. One useful change is to replace have to with willing or unwilling. I'm willing to answer tonight because this person needs me. I'm unwilling to answer this tonight because I need to read the room and wait for tomorrow. The obligation still remains, but the grammar reveals who makes the choice. Are you the creator or the victim? And there's another thing called vows, which take the same exact machinery into the future. And it's things like, I always ruin this. I never trust people. And some vows are great and they can be chosen with care and deserve to be held because that creates certainty and stillness. Others were written by a frightened version of us during one bad hour, and then they create years of entrainment within ourselves. So a vow oftentimes becomes an anchor because the past self keeps signing up for a future self that never gets invited into the room and into the present moment. It's kind of wild. And what ends up taking place is you witness the 78 because your whole world runs on that system. But the 33 is your own sovereignty, and it's literally structured in your spine. You have a constant reminder every time you stand up, every time you sit down. It is inside of you how you can move directly into love. So I'm going to leave one more story here around Yeshua, because we are 33, we thank Jesus. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, he gives us the image of a great millstone hung around the neck of anyone who causes a little one to stumble. And then that person is cast out to sea if they cause a little one to stumble. The physical weight, rope, and water are the symbol. The warning places the consequence in the same shape as the harm. So whatever a person uses to bind and drop another can become the thing tied around their own neck. The thing you think is freeing somebody is the thing drowning. The thing that you say negatively is the thing that's negatively impacting you. And all this becomes useful when one sentence is placed under observation. So in the link here, I built a small experiment around one sentence. And what I want you to do is observe it for 7 days without trying to fix it. On day 8, you'll make one cut. 49 days later, you come back and see whether the thing adapted to your growth or demanded the old version of you back. So there's an auditing tool that I have here that'll help you rewrite the words that you say. So it'll take you from the limiting words into the abundant words, and the link's in the description. If you don't want to use it, the action steps are also in the notes below. And what you can do is do this all on paper, a notebook, or journal if you want. You know, some people really like to do that. But the tool has 7 fields. The first is anchor. Blank keeps me grounded. Everything that comes to mind, and don't overly judge it, just write them down. Then what's the Archon? Blank rules me. Notice which sentence becomes harder to repeat out loud. My job rules me. My wife rules me. My kids rule me. That's the ruler. That's the Archon. Not a bad thing, it's just the Archon. That's what you've allowed to rule you. Then the Charon. What coin, what debt am I paying, and who collects it? The coin may be a swallowed sentence or an unwritten book that you keep procrastinating on, a debt you hadn't paid, one more dinner spent somewhere you don't want to be. Then you've got Rancho. Rancho is who benefits from the fence I built in my life. Because you built the fence, whether you inherited it and you maintained it, or you built it from the ground up. Then signature. What part am I renewing? And what part was never mine to choose? Then you check your root. If my life doubled, like we talked about in the beginning with the tree, would this thing celebrate the rise or would it fight it? And then the cut. Name one strand, one rope you can cut this week. One meeting, one account, one conversation. And here's the thing, I want to make sure that you take this the right way. This isn't about cutting people out of your life, okay? Don't just go do that after this video, okay? Or walking away from your job, you know, or like doing something crazy with money. Right? It may be the pattern inside the relationship that gets cut. It may be the guilt that you've held, or the silence, or the way that you've allowed someone to run over you. The cut is one real act that puts your own authority literally back into the sentence. You become the creator again. So what I want you to do is run this process. Today is day 0. It's the first day of your life. Choose one anchor and then photograph the sentence so you carry the same artifact through the week. Day 1, track attention. Day 2, flag where you're fused to the anchor. Day 3, compare expectations with what actually took place. Day 4 is about repetition. Day 5, authority, okay? Day 6 is about identifying the absolutes, okay? Record every always and never, all the vows that you keep setting for yourself. Day 7, record the behavior the anchor produced and the action that went missing. Then what you do is you write one sentence each night and don't try to fix it. Then day 8 is your resurrection, and that belongs to you. You read the 7 lines end to end, and then you take action. Make the cut you named on day 0. Send the message, close the account, decline the meeting, say the sentence, then write the 8th line, which is this: the cut was this, and this is what changed in my body. And I run the same sentence again 49 days later. And do this, set your calendar for it, because it's important that you get this reminder. And after those 49 days, you'll get a reading that you wouldn't have gotten when you started this. And it's a perspective, it's getting outside of that fence. If the relationship or the commitment or the structure adapted and kept feeding your growth, then it was carrying more than the anchor. And if it punished every step of the rise of your boat and it demanded the old version of you back, then you learned one thing. You learned what kind of rule had been hiding inside the word grounded or inside the word safety. So the cool thing about this is you have 2 points of reference. Day 8, where you make the cut, and day 49, the 7 cycles of 7, time between the death and the rebirth. And what that actually does is it moves you from being ruled in your stillness by an outside force that creates death, and it steps you into becoming the creator of your life. Because by the year 2030, I'm going to tell you this: the things we say, the way we feel, what we speak, and how we think will become so instantaneous in our material reality that we will create chaos. The other option is we can create peace and love and care. And we'll do this by learning to change the words we speak. And when we see the coded reality that runs in our lives through these words, you'll recognize how easy it is to become an integrated human being. So that at some point when artificial superintelligence comes along, because it is, it's going to observe you and it's going to say, wow, this person's hella divine. They got it together. I actually need to learn from them, because the thing a machine won't know how to modulate is stillness from a space of infinite choice. So our future reality starts today. And this message, honestly, is the first thing you can do. It's something as simple as your language. And it's not by dissecting every single word. I mean, honestly, nobody wants to do that. But by paying attention until you start feeling a frequency from a space of truth that is so much deeper than the frequency from a space of lies or a space of death or a space of control or living under this archonic rule. This truth lives inside of you. The lies are what's capturing your attention and keeping it away from your own sovereign reality. So which words are you going to choose today? Are you going to allow the anchors to run your life? And then what happens when you watch one of them long enough that your seat changes from the point of inside of the field, inside of the rancho, the circle, to the observer outside of it? This full process is what I call the 33 degrees, or renaming it. We're taking it away from the Masons. Okay. And the 7-letter lens is the other side of it. All right. Both are free. So tonight, do this. Photograph your paper, run one lens on one sentence, follow the change through 8 days, and then see your transmission at the 49 days. And here's the thing. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, because there's so much more to come and I don't want you to miss it. It helps what I'm doing. And I'm so excited to be on this beautiful journey with you. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And I love you.